Welcome to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. I'm your host, Simone Morris, and I have a passion for empowering others to take responsibility for their careers. Yes, I've written several books on owning your career and am loving hosting this podcast. This podcast is for you if you're willing to make a shift to the driver's seat in your career. We feature leaders who inspire, empower, and motivate you for consistent career action for results. Please continue to join us every Sunday when a new episode is released. Let's get into this week's show. Welcome to this week's episode of the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. Today, I'm delighted to have with us Fran Hauser. She is an author, a keynote speaker, and a startup investor at the intersection of women's empowerment, career fulfillment, and collective well-being. As a longtime media executive, Fran has always championed the power of content in shaping culture, educating the public, and driving awareness of important issues. She's the best-selling author of The Myth of the Nice Girl, Achieving a Career You Can Love Without Becoming a Person You Hate, which has been translated into 6 languages and was named the best business book of the year 2018 by Audible. Fran's new book, Embrace the Work, Love Your Career, is quickly becoming the go-to for women seeking more joy and fulfillment in their career. She regularly speaks at conferences and organizations to help women build careers they love while staying true to themselves. Please help me in welcoming Fran Hauser to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. Fran, thank you so much for being on the show.
Hi, Simone. I'm so happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, tell us a little bit about what you're currently doing. I did share your bio, but tell us a little bit about what you're currently doing today.
Well, it's interesting. You know, I very much live in this multi-hyphenate world. So I do startup investing. I'm a writer. I've written 2 books. I'm also a speaker and a book coach in the nonfiction space. And if I had to say, out of all of those things, the piece that I'm enjoying the most is actually the book coaching. Like, I'm really loving helping aspiring authors crystallize their book idea, and get it out into the world. So I'm having a lot of fun with that.
Oh, that's awesome. So what were you doing before that? You were in the corporate space.
Yes, I was in corporate for a very long time. I was a media executive. I was the last corporate role I had was president of digital at Time Inc. So I was responsible for all of the digital extensions for magazine brands like People and InStyle, Entertainment Weekly, Essence,
Nice.
all these great brands. It was such a great job. So I was in corporate for a very long time. I made it to the C-suite. And both of my books and my speaking practice is really around, how do you achieve a career that you love while staying true to yourself? And that's really kind of that's my thought leadership platform, which is so rewarding because I get to hear from women all around the world, really, like who've read one of my books or who listened to one of my talks. And there's just nothing better than hearing that, the positive impact that it's had on professional women that are kind of, they're navigating their careers. Maybe they're feeling stuck. Maybe they're in transition. Maybe they don't love the culture, where they're working. So it's just been very, very rewarding work.
Well, Fran, you mentioned you've made it to the C-suite and now you're doing your own thing. Based on both of those experiences, what would you say is the secret sauce or the necessary ingredients to embrace your authentic self and take ownership of your career?
Well, I think in terms of embracing your authentic self, it's really important to know what your core values are as a human being and to not check those at the door when you go to work. because I've seen people who they almost like try to take on a different persona,
Mm.
when they're on the job. And what I found is that that's the best way to become less confident, because you're not comfortable in your own skin. It's like if you're making pretend to be somebody else, it's really hard to feel comfortable and to feel confident. And like I found in my own career journey, especially when I was at Time Inc. and I was there for 10 years, I was always known as a compassionate leader, as someone who is kind and warm and empathetic, and all of those things. And I would always get asked by women, like, how can you be so nice and still be successful? Like, how did you make it to the corner office? You're so nice. Um, and I feel like there's so much power in those qualities. There's so much power in being empathetic and compassionate and warm. And it makes you, it helps you develop relationships. It helps you build trust. And I think being successful in business at the end of the day is it's all about your relationships. It's all about your connections. So if you're like a really good human being, um, for me anyway, I think that was one of the biggest reasons why I was so successful, was because I had developed so many friendships and so many really deep relationships over the years. So it made it easier for me to negotiate. It
Mhm.
made it easier for me to get resources allocated to my department. It made it easier for me to recruit top talent from other parts of the company. So when I was like truly myself, instead of like trying to take on this like tougher, meaner persona, when I was just truly, really myself, I think that's really when I did my best work, and I was the most effective.
Mm. Mm. Where does that come from?
Oh, I know it definitely comes from my parents. My parents are immigrants, and they moved to a suburb in Westchester, right outside of New York City. They moved here from Italy when I was 2. So I was also born in Italy. And I watched them build this life for themselves and for their family. I'm the oldest of 4. Um, not knowing the language. They both were small business owners. My dad was a stonemason and landscaper. My mother was a tailor. Um, and I worked with them from a very young age. Like when I was in first grade, I was doing invoices for my dad's business. I was helping my mom like create marketing collateral. It was, I mean, Simone, seriously, like I've been in business my whole life. Um, but the best part of it was I really got to see them in action, and they just were always these just incredibly generous, um, beautiful like people. They were just adored by the community. They still are. I lived one town over from where I grew up. And um, they're just such good people, such hard workers. And so I think from a very, very young age, I got exposure to that, to seeing the way that they show up for people, the way that they show up at work. Um, and how it was really beneficial for them at the end of the day. They were able to build this beautiful family and this beautiful life. um, so I think that was just like hugely inspiring for me.
Mm. So is there thinking on your part as you reflect back about not going directly to the entrepreneurial route, but to
Mm.
be in a, because you're witnessing your parents, both of them you said were small business owners, and then you've come, I want to say full circle, but I'm not sure. And you now are an entrepreneur as
Yeah.
well. Was there intentionality in you going the corporate or working for someone else, going that route first, and then becoming an entrepreneur?
It's such a great question. And you're totally right. I have come full circle. And but here's the thing, there was no intentionality. Like I wish I could say that I was like being strategic about it. But the truth was that, my parents, basically my dad made it to 3rd grade and my mother to 5th grade in Italy. Um, and then they moved to the United States and they knew nothing about colleges, finding the right mentors. access to networks. I mean, I really had to figure it out on my own. I was, first in my family to go to college. Um, and all I knew was that they didn't want me going away. So I had to I had to go someplace local where I could commute. Um, and I ended up going to Pace University in Pleasantville, which is a great school, by the way. Um, but because I had no like guidance at all, I decided to major in public accounting because it was a surefire way to get a really good job, like right out of school, because that's what Pace was known for. And back then, I can't remember if it was like the big four accounting firms or the big six, I can't remember, but they did a lot of recruiting at Pace. And so that was just me saying, like, okay, like this seems to be like the path that was the least risky.
Yeah.
And I do think that it's interesting now. I don't know if I ever really thought about this, but maybe I was craving a little bit more stability and safety. Seeing my parents struggle, as they were trying to put like food on the table for all four of us, especially when I was really young. And so, I mean, I started my career in public accounting. I have pivoted like 5 times,
Right.
like if I think about all the different paths, whether it was then like moving over into like more of a general manager and president role, working in media, working as a startup investor. I've been startup investing for 10 years, having this thought leadership practice, doing book coaching, like, and the reason I say this, I think it's really important because it's college graduation time. And whenever I talk to college students, they're always so like worried about what they're going to major in. And they have so much stress about it. And I always say to them, this is just the first chapter. It's just the first chapter of your career. Most people actually pivot. I think it's like 5 times in their
Mm,
career. Most people like, so
mm,
don't put so much pressure on yourself that you have to have it all figured out. Like you can always do something different. Um,
mm,
but I do like, I have to say though, Simone, I love being an entrepreneur. Like this is really like the last 10 years of my career have been much more entrepreneurial because being an author is entrepreneurial, being a speaker is entrepreneurial, being a book coach, even being a startup investor. I mean, I'm working for myself,
mm,
and I love it. I feel like it's such a blessing that I can decide who I want to work with and what projects do I want to take on. Like what are the projects and people that are really going to fuel me, that are going to give me energy. Where do I genuinely want to spend my time? So it was a long path, and a circuitous path to get here, but I love being an entrepreneur.
mm. I love your story so much because it's making me reflect on my own story. So I am the youngest of six, and I was the first one to go to college. And my mother didn't want me going away, but she did agree that I could go as far as Hamden, Connecticut. So I grew up in Fairfield County in Stamford, Connecticut. And so I went to Quinnipiac and, not out of the state, but close enough to home. And I was on a secretarial path and then decided, I want to be a buyer. So I got my pen out because I was about to write down how many pivots I've had in my career as well.
How many have you had?
I don't know. I mean, I started out wanting to be a buyer. That didn't work out. Then I shifted over to IT. Then I was a life coach. Then I was in photography. And I was in corporate doing IT, information technology, project management. And then I pivoted again, and I'm an entrepreneur right now and an author. So, it's the rolling pivot, I think.
The rolling pivot.
Yeah.
It's the rolling pivot. And there's like certain times in your life and in your career where whatever you're doing makes sense, like in that moment, and you might be finding like that it's fulfilling and it's great. And then it just gets to a point where it's like, okay, you know what? I kind of want to do something else. Like that was great. It served me really well. Right. Um, I remember it's so fascinating when I look at my resume every 4 years, like I swear, it's like I could show it to you, like clockwork. Every 4 years, I take on either a much bigger role within my existing organization, or I leave to like go do something else. And
Mm.
if you think about it, the 4 years, it kind of makes sense, right? Because like the first year, you're just learning. You're like on a listening tour, right? You're really not all that productive. And then your second year, you become like super productive. And your third year, like you're really creating a lot of value for the organization. And then I think after that is when you kind of start getting a little like, okay, like
Mm.
complacent, maybe a little bored, like feeling that itch. So it's really fascinating to me that when I look at my career, it's literally it's every 4 years. There's not a pivot, not a total pivot, but taking on either a much bigger role or moving into a different company altogether. And one of the things that I will say, Simone, and I talk about this a lot in my book, Embrace the Work, Love Your Career, is just how important it is when you're in your career to get out of autopilot mode and to
Mm.
really like take a step back and reflect on what's working for you and what isn't. You know, what are those things that are filling you up and what are the energy drainers? And I don't think we do this enough. Like I always talk about like detoxing, like doing a career detox, you know, like it's so critical because it's like a rat race and we're just kind of like we're just going. And I would really encourage everybody to just stop, just take a minute, take a pause
Mhm.
and take some time, take 30 minutes to just like write stuff down on a piece of paper. Look at your calendar for the last 3 months and pick out the meetings or the experiences that put a smile on your face. Like,
Mhm.
what was it about those experiences that was so fulfilling? Was it the type of problem you were solving? Was it the people that you were meeting with? Was it the skills that you were using? Like, really go deep. And then how can you do more of that? Because there probably are parts of your job that are bringing you joy, even if you're feeling negative, you know, but if you really do that work to say, okay, is there something about my job that that is bringing me joy? And is there a way for me to double down on that? Is there a way for me to do more of that type of work? And that's usually a conversation, right, with your manager. But I always say that, like, instead of just completely giving up and moving on, especially if you like the people you work with and it's a good culture, if it's a toxic culture, that's a whole other story. Walk away. But right. But if it's like a good culture and good people, and maybe you're just getting a little bit bored, that's really the time to kind of do that reflection.
I love that message, Fran, because it signifies really taking control and not just being a passenger. I'll use that language. So, as you think about other actions people could take, what would you say for you has been the most critical in terms of taking ownership of your career?
So I I have to say that the most critical thing has been making sure that I'm creating real value for the organization because that's always had such an incredible impact on my career. Like, so I feel like one of the things that I've done really well is kind of taking a step back and looking at the business and really thinking through like how can I drive real value for the business? Like, do I have a new business idea? Do I have a new idea for a revenue stream? Or maybe there's like a process that's like really inefficient and I can figure out a way to make it more efficient and more productive and like free up time for people. Or maybe there's something with our culture. Maybe there's a program that I could launch that's, really going to have like a huge impact on our employees. Like I'm always trying to think big in terms of like what is visible work that I can do that is going to create real value and that's going to get me noticed. And I think that kind of mindset, that value creation mindset, what that does is it gets you onto people's radar.
Mm.
And then when there are new opportunities within the company, you're one of the first people that they think of. And I think one way to get control really of your career is by doing incredible work and
Mm.
doing highly visible work. Um, the best opportunities, the best promotions that I've gotten over the course of my career are all because of the value that I created and through my work.
And then I would assume from your previous comment in our interview that the relationships also play a part in that equation.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Huge. Like I'll share a story with you. And I really do love this story because I think it's very powerful in terms of showing like just how important relationships are. So when I was at Time Inc., I was working on launching People Magazine's website, people.com, and I had this like really great team. But what I didn't have is I didn't have control over the technology resources. That was a centralized department, but I needed those resources, right? Because it's a website. Like I need HTML developers and backend developers. And everyone in the company, everybody was fighting for these technology resources. And that the chief technology officer, Mitch Clafe, CTO of the whole company, right? 10,000 employees. I remember having a conversation with him one day where he said, Fran, the only time anybody ever calls me is to complain. Something's not working. You'll appreciate this coming from IT, right? The website is down, their computer's not working. The only time I get a phone call is to hear a complaint. And so when I heard Mitch say that, I said to myself, you know what? I need to do a good job of like calling him to say thank you, like when things are going well. And I did that. And I would always say thank you. If one of his team members did a great job, thank you. I would email the CEO and copy Mitch to let her know what a great job Mitch's team was doing. And I wasn't doing this in a manipulative sort of way. I was really doing it from my heart. Like I really felt for him. And I also wanted to make sure that he was getting credit for the great work that his team was doing. So I developed such a special relationship with him. And it got to the point where like anytime I'd go into his office, he would say like, "Oh my God, what are you going to ask me for now? Because I can't say no to you." And I was able, like people.com ended up being the world's largest media website, right? It was doing over 1 billion monthly page views, 40 million monthly unique visitors. My team could not have accomplished that if we didn't have the technology resources from Mitch's team. And that was probably my biggest win at the whole 10 years that I was at Time Inc. was that website. Like that website became one of the top 10 most profitable businesses out of 200 businesses at the company. And talk about like putting me on the map and putting me on people's radar. But if I didn't have that deep relationship with Mitch, I don't know. I don't know what would have happened because I needed his resources to build great features and functionality, like for the website to perform as well as it was performing, all the technical stuff. Like so I just think that's such a great example of the power of relationships and connection.
Mm. I love the thinking that goes in, and the fact that you said it wasn't manipulative or slimy,
No.
in terms of building a relationship that will help you in your career, but as a byproduct of the relationship, some benefits there as well. Mhm.
Yeah, definitely.
So what do you say to those who are wanting to move up to C-suite or others? How do they, we take the point about nurturing relationships and building authentic relationships, but how does one go about finding additional advocates or people to speak for them in the organization? What resources have been helpful to you?
So this is so important because there are certain people in the organization that have the CEO's ear.
Mm.
And I remember a time, one of those people was Paul Kane. He was the chief revenue officer. Um, and so he was always one of the first people to know, like, if there was going to be a reorganization, a restructuring, if there were going to be new roles created. And he would always put my name forward, And um, I had a really wonderful relationship with Paul. And I think so much of it is like being intentional, picking your head up from the computer, because I think we're just all so like, okay, I got to get the work done. I got to get the work done. You're either at your computer or you're in meetings, and or on Zooms, like in-person meeting Zooms, going through your email box. Like, yes, that's all work that has to be done. But making a commitment to yourself that you are going to pick your head up from the computer and that you are going to ask people to meet for a coffee. Or, you know what? I'll tell you what's really great, especially for people that are like really busy. Come up with a great idea that you want to talk to them about. Get 20 minutes on their calendar. Like maybe there's like some trend that you're seeing out in the world that could be really interesting to, bring into the company in some way. You're showing the individual that you're smart, you're ambitious, you're thinking about things, you're creative. And it's a great way to build a relationship, especially with somebody who's like super busy, or who may not have the time to like go grab a coffee or go for a walk, or, but I do remember there was a moment at Time Inc. where I did feel like I was two heads down. And when I picked my head up, I realized that I actually needed to be so intentional, like to the point of I carved out an hour each week to I don't even want to say networking, because I hate that word, but like to either, right, like to meet somebody new or to nurture a relationship, but it was really about, it was connecting time. It was my time to connect. And I carved out 1 hour a week because I'm like, I could do that. I could find an hour each week, right? And just think about how powerful that is. That's 50, 50 hours out of the year that you're dedicating to building relationships and connecting. So I think a big part of it, Simone, is being intentional about it, prioritizing it, because it's very easy for that to get like to just fall down the bottom of the to-do list, because there's nothing urgent about it. There's nothing time sensitive, right? Like, but at the same time, it is so important. Building relationships is so important to the way that you contribute to your organization and the way that you develop your career. It's important both for your work and for your career. It's not a selfish thing. That's what like sometimes people will say to me, but I don't know. I feel like I'm like taking time away from the company to like do this networking meeting, but it could help the company too, like it really can. It's going to help you in your career, because these are people that can open doors for you. They can be sounding boards. Maybe they can help you get unstuck. They can mentor you. But there's also business opportunities that can come out of having these meetings that can create real value for your organization. So I don't see it as being selfish at all.
I'm going to ask you again, where does this come from? Because my experience from my college days, I didn't learn this at home, because the learning at home for me, I'm from the Caribbean. I'm from Jamaica specifically, and we moved here when I was in 5th grade. I don't remember that education at home. So, and as I think about college and coming out from undergrad, I don't remember those lessons as well. It was, I don't know, for me, it still was that heads down mentality. So
Yep.
where did that lesson come from for you, Fran?
I'll tell you where it came from, because exact same as you. Where it came from was really, it was like the middle of my career. So I had already been working for like 15 years. I wasn't prioritizing networking relationships at all. And what happened was I went on this women's leadership summit. It was a Time Warner summit for like the top female leaders across all the divisions. So it was Time Inc., HBO, Warner Brothers. So there were like 50 women, and we're at this retreat. And Pat Philly Crucial, she was like the chief administrative officer for all of Time Warner. She was the number 2 to the chairman of Time Warner. She had a really big role. She was talking to us, and somebody asked her, what do you attribute your success to? And she said, I attribute it to the fact that I've always prioritized building relationships and making connections with people. And she went on to say that she would do 2 networking meetings every single day. And I remember my jaw dropped, because I was like she's like, I'll have a coffee, and then, like I'll go for a walk in the afternoon, or I'll do a breakfast and then like a drink. But literally it was her thing. She was very, very disciplined about making time for networking and literally doing it twice a day. And that's when I realized, I was like, oh my gosh, there's no way I'm going to do twice a day. But could I do one a week? Could I do like 1 hour a week? Because I knew I had to build that muscle. So I had to be disciplined about it. So I did that. I did that for a year. And then I have to say, like, it just literally became a natural part of just like who I am and what I do. I think I was always meant to do it because I love people, but that wasn't the way that I was raised. I was raised hard work, heads down, get the work done. So that was my focus. And you know what? I'm not going to lie, early part of my career, that served me well, right? But then you get to a point where that's not enough. Hard
Right.
work is not enough,
Right.
right? It's not just the work, it's the people. And I really, I am so grateful that I had that learning moment from Pat. Like I really consider her a mentor, even though I never really had a ton of one-on-one time with her,
Mhm.
but just in that moment, wow. Because what she said was so startling. And I feel like I needed to hear something that was startling to get me to focus on it. Right.
I
But
love that.
that's where it came from.
What I love about you, Fran, in this conversation is I'm noticing how you remember the people who have been impactful in your career and life, and you're able to articulate your value several times in the conversation. You're able to talk about your impact and value that you've brought to the organizations that you've worked for. And I think that's a skill set that many can learn from.
That's interesting. So just really kind of being mindful about the people in your life
Well,
that
well,
have
I
made
think it's
you
an
who you
honor. It's an honor to talk about the people and to recognize them with their name because, sometimes you can say, there was this manager without
are.
attributing
That's
it to
true.
the manager, but each time you've called out, you've said the person's name.
Oh,
And then in terms of value, sometimes we're asked to articulate, well, what's your contribution or what value did you bring to the role? And so you're able to talk about the number of site visits to the people.com website and things that's happened under your leadership.
it's really important. Specifics are important. I was just reading uh, an investment pitch summary from a startup founder. I'm an investor in her business, and she's about to go out to do another fundraise. And she put together the summary of her business, and I was editing it for her. And I really felt like what was missing was I want numbers. I want, what I mean? Like it's one thing to say we have a big audience. We've grown revenue significantly. Okay, give me numbers. Numbers are so powerful. Names are so powerful, right? It's like because when we talk in generalities and we're vague, if you think about storytelling, right? Storytelling is so powerful. So um when I read something and it reads more like a textbook, it's just not as interesting, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm thank you for saying that though, because I agree with you when it comes to there is so much honor. I feel like you are honoring someone when you use their name. So
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm in this space today because I used to work at a company called Diageo, and that was my last corporate job. And I saw today that the CEO, the chairman and CEO, passed away. And I've been very reflective today about how my time there has impacted me and how the late Ivan Menendez, I always have a hard time with his last name, Menendez. I can't even say his last name, but he was very impactful to me. So I just noticed that when we were having the conversation, just giving honor to those who've made an impact. And I could talk to you for the whole day, Fran.
Oh, this was amazing, Simone. So
Yeah.
great. I
Yeah.
love talking to you. Thank you for doing
Yes.
this. This is really important work that you're doing.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. And please tell our listeners how they can stay connected with you if they'd love to do so.
Yeah, so my website is franhauser.com. They can sign up for my newsletter there. And I'm on Instagram, Fran_Hauser. And I'm also on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, Fran, thanks so much for being a guest on the Power of Owning Your Career podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Simone. Take care.
Absolutely.
I sincerely hope that you enjoyed this week's empowering career story on the podcast. If you did, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. Wherever you listen to the podcast, be sure that you are subscribing and that you rate and review the podcast. It's so important as we continue to spread the word of career empowerment. In addition, you can head over to the LinkedIn platform and join the Power of Owning Your Career discussion group. There you can have access to the guests who have been on the podcast, as well as others listening to the podcast, as well as myself, where we can continue the conversation. I hope to see you on that platform. You can also email me at pooyc@simonemorris.com if you have a suggestion for guest or a message that you want me to hear personally. Thanks so much, and make it an inspiring, empowering week in your career.